Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Masters Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into. There is quite a bit of data to scrutinize, overanalyze, dissect, and any other synonym of evaluate that you want to use for the content that we are able to gather through Fantasy National for the Masters this week. Hopefully I can glean some information for you all. Otherwise, point you in the right direction of the statistics that I think are going to be a factor this week at Augusta National. So let's not waste any time. We have a lot to get into. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is simply the best tool out there. Go check them out. It is well worth your investment. You will not be disappointed, I guarantee it. In the descriptions of the Twitch and YouTube videos, there are links to my social media. This is where I post my betting cards. I posted some interesting research on the past Masters champions dating back to 2012. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all. Do you have any wagers put in yet? Do you have any early leans or pivots or fades for DFS? What are some storylines that you think are going to play this week? Do you think Rory has a good chance to complete his career Grand Slam? Do you think Tiger plays? So I'm here for all of that. Want to hear from you all. So jump in, chat. Let's dig into the data for the 2022 Masters. We start with WinFinder. And the reason I'm starting with WinFinder, we looked at it a bit last night, but the forecast tomorrow evening, they're supposed to get a lot of rain. And then Wednesday's supposed to die down a little bit in terms of the wind, maybe a little bit of rain in the afternoon. But Thursday, a high of 72, sustained wind at 17, gusts up near 30 miles an hour, and that's just Thursday. Friday, very cool, a high of 64, a lot of wind. Saturday, a high of 59, and a whole ton of wind. And then Sunday starts to warm up again, still quite a bit of wind, but I wanted to start here with this forecast, seeing that what is projected is going to dictate a little bit of the direction we go in terms of statistics that we look at tonight. So having said that, let me make sure I bring up chat and explaining and showing why I'm going in the direction that I am going tonight. So I wanted to bring up WindFinder. There it is. From what I'm seeing, a whole lot of wind Thursday. Friday and Saturday, very cool, blustery, chilly in the mornings with a whole ton of wind. And then Sunday looks to be, at least temperature-wise, what I would expect from Georgia this time of year, but still windy. So havoc is what I am seeing, a lot of havoc. So we come to Fantasy National, and another great thing about Fantasy National, it's Masters Week, so they've donned all the green and yellow throughout all their pages and whatnot. So we looked at last night in the initial research show the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. We saw that we are on lightning bent greens. They're always lightning fast. It's a long par 72, just over 7,500 yards. It's going to play difficult. Obviously, it's a major. All the time, majors play generally difficult. So one of the first things that I want to do as far as review, we always take a look at putting, and I am going to have to remove the 2022 season filter. So custom date range, we're going to go back to April the 12th. We need to filter for bent, and we're going to go ahead and do lightning, and I'll show you why we can't do just lightning. The max is one round, and that's from the Memorial last year. So I'm going to have to include the fast filter, and we have some amount of rounds here, 28 from Cam Davis, So a good enough sample to glean whatever information we can towards putting. And the reason I'm using April 12th, 2021, this is the week right after the Masters. So this was the week leading into the RBC Heritage. I don't want to include any Masters data. That is what the color-coded spreadsheet is for that I make for every tournament. So your top performing putters on fast and lightning bent greens since the Masters last year. They're Patrick Cantlay, Rory, Abraham Ancer, Seamus Power, Mac Hughes, Jason Kokrak, Jon Rahm, Cam Davis, Zach Johnson, and Dustin Johnson. So some of your usual suspects here: Mac Hughes, always a good putter; Abraham Ancer, Zach Johnson, Kevin Nall, just outside the top 10; Justin Rose, players like that. Cam Davis, I believe his win came on bent as well. So no surprise to see him up here. Generally very good on bent anyway. Not a great putter overall, but pretty good on bent surfaces. We can see here now that I've clicked on him, he's very good in the wind, which is a big positive for this week. He's good when it's difficult, and we'll get into all that. But there is a look at your top 10 putters on fast and lightning bent greens. So I'm going to remove those filters. We also took a look at long courses. This being over 7,500 yards, it's always played over 7,400 yards, which is termed or deemed long by Fantasy National standards. So with 15 rounds here, it's going to be enough. It's going to have to be enough. So in the past year, since last year's Masters, your top performers on long courses: Gary Woodland, Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Cam Smith, Joaquin Niemann, Victor Hovland, Terrell Hatton, Luke List, and Taylor Gooch. The good thing is Fantasy National has loaded the Valero stats into the database, but as far as I know, JJ Spawn is not in the list of the field yet. So we're going to have to take a look at JJ Spawn kind of alone and try to gauge where he would fall in some of these rankings later on that we look at. But there's a look at your top performers on long courses. Let's look at moderate and windy now that we have a pretty good feel that the wind is going to pick up and play a pretty big factor this week at Augusta. And we have 36 rounds, which is going to be plenty. I'm not going to change the filter, just the top performers in windy conditions since last year's Masters. You've got Sungjae, Jon Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Joaquin Niemann, Justin Thomas, Cam Smith, Louis, and Sam Burns. So some of these names are starting to overlap. If you remember Kiowa, the PGA last year, very, very windy. Guys who played well there are going to have pretty good success or rise up on this leaderboard. So that is one of the other overviews that we kind of took a look at last night. And then lastly, something else that we looked at was difficult to par. I am very confident that the course is going to play difficult. It normally does, and with the wind kicked up, it's going to be even that much more difficult. So your top performers since last year's Masters on or in rounds where scoring is difficult relative to par: Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Louis, Jon Rahm, Rory, Daniel Berger, Dustin Johnson, Abraham Ancer, Victor Hovland, and Patrick Reed. So I think that's going to do it for the kind of review of last night and what we looked at. We always look at strokes gained approach, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. But I'm going to look at strokes gained approach in windy conditions. Knowing that the wind is going to pick up, and especially for it to be forecast as gusty as it is, you're going to want to get guys that know how to, one, play in the wind, two, be able to account for that. So your top 10 strokes gained approach players in the wind since last year's Masters. Those are Colin Morikawa, Daniel Berger, Paul Casey, Jon Rahm, Will Zalatoris, Webb Simpson, Russell Henley, Justin Thomas, Victor Hovland, Louis, and Stuart Sink. So those are your top strokes gained approach players in the wind. We're going to take a look at around the green and more specifically scrambling a little bit later on. But something else that I want to make sure I look at while I'm focused on strokes gained approach, we're going to take the wind off. We're going to look at strokes gained approach when it's difficult relative to par. Again, pretty darn confident that the Masters is going to play difficult this year. Normally does. So your top strokes gained approach players when it is difficult: Colin Morikawa, Hideki, Daniel Berger, Paul Casey, Jon Rahm, Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Abraham Ancer, Victor Hovland, and Shane Lowry. So a lot of overlap here from the wind and now the difficult. And Colin Morikawa, no explanation needed. Usually number one in strokes gained approach. Anyway, you slice and dice the data. Hideki has been up there on both. Daniel Berger's been up there on both. Paul Casey. Scheffler, who's having a fantastic year. Hovland, always a great ball striker. Now Shane Lowry rises into the top 10 when you factor in scoring difficult to par. Really good stuff there. Let's see. Any other way I want to look at this in terms of a strokes gained approach or maybe strokes gained around the green? Yeah. So while we have the scoring relative to par difficult filter on, it wouldn't be a terrible idea to just take a look at strokes gained around the green. I'm going to be more focused on scrambling specifically, but we can take a look. So those 10 are Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, Taylor Gooch, Mackenzie Hughes, Patrick Reed, Danny Willett, Kevin Kisner, Patrick Cantlay, Charles Schwartzel, and Brian Harman. So really good stuff there. Again, probably not a lot of surprise for most of these. Mackenzie Hughes, Patrick Reed, well-known short game players. Schwartzel, Cantlay doesn't get enough credit for his around the green play. Taylor Gooch is somebody that's a little surprising. I don't think of him as an around the green player, but when it's difficult, he has traditionally been very good around the green. So I think that's all I want to do in terms of what I call the umbrella stats. There's certainly an argument to look at off the tee. I am more concerned with greens, so we're going to take a look more heavily at greens and regulation and things like that. So I'm going to remove this filter. I'm going to keep the same custom date range for now. And the reason why I'm so focused on greens and scrambling and all that, let me bring up the this file here. Let me switch over to Microsoft Excel. So this is what we kind of looked at last night, and bring up chat again. There. So this is the past performance spreadsheet that I make every tournament. This is specific to Augusta National. Now this does date back to 2012, just because we don't have a whole lot of data. I decided to grab as much as I could. So this is, like I mentioned, the past performance. But what I've also done is brought in the course factors. If you have watched me or watched any of my content for any amount of time, you'll know that I try to delineate what is the most important factors at a course and narrow in on players in that regard. And you'll notice that we don't have any strokes gained approach, strokes gained off the tee, or anything like that. We just don't have a lot of that data, or any of that data, but we don't have a lot of data in general since most of the stuff is proprietary to the Masters, to Augusta National. But what we can gather, I have brought in. And the most important thing to know here is that the higher the number that this is, the more important or more indicative of high leaderboard success that it is. So, for example, like fairways gained is close to neutral. It's a 0.68. So it's close to neutral. It's not, the fairways are very important, but a lot of players hit fairways here. They're generally easier to hit, and there's such a known premium on being in the fairway that with everybody is hitting fairways, you're not going to generally gain on the field as much. So that's why these are mitigated a little bit in terms of raw numbers. Now, fairways are absolutely important. It's not that you can, bomb and gouge your way around here. You can't. But that's why this number is so low. But I want you to focus on the greens in regulation here. This number is very, very high. In fact, let me, off here to the side, let me bring up my full course kind of spreadsheet that I made, just to kind of give you a sense of how important some of these numbers are. For example, the Valero, we mentioned last week how important the greens were to hit at the Valero. And we saw that the 2022 season, it averaged to a 2.3, which is pretty high. But the 4-year running total was a 2.95. That is some of the highest that you will see. You think of any course that's important to hit greens, I can almost guarantee you they're not going to be as high as the Masters. I'm trying to highlight these for you. Let's see. I'll bring it all the way over here for you. So, like the Honda, it is at 2.81. Genesis, 3.2. 3.4 or 3.3. Yeah, 3.4 at Pebble. You've seen nothing that is very important or as important to the Masters at hitting greens. This might be the tournament. Again, first column here, these green numbers. These are the Masters is the most important tournament to hit the greens. It is just plain and simple. There might be one or two more, but I haven't seen one yet tonight. The Wells Fargo in about a month is close. It's at a 3.85. You've got, let's see, the Memorial, 3.4 and some change. Charles Schwab, 3.4.5. Again, remember, the higher the number, the more indicative to high leaderboard success it is. So the Masters, and the whole reason I even brought this entire spreadsheet up is just to compare against other courses. So when you see a greens in regulation of 3.85, you know that this is an extremely important statistic. So we're definitely going to be looking at a whole lot of greens in regulation, total, or like with no filters. We're going to look at greens in the wind, greens on difficult, all that stuff. So greens in regulation, very, very, very important. Sand saves does not appear to be very important. Not a lot of bunkers in play here at Augusta. I'm more so concerned with scrambling, and we don't get that data at any tournament. So let's see. Moving on here, we talked about birdies and bogeys last night. I had a feeling that the bogey avoidance was going to be a bit more prominent than the birdies gained. That tends to be the overarching factor here in terms of this tab. So a 3.2 to a 2.9, just to kind of compare that against other courses. So like the Valero last week, I will scroll over for this tab. So the Valero last week, it was more important to get birdies than bogeys, but it was relatively close. The Heritage, it's more important to get birdies than bogeys. The birdies at the Heritage are actually more important than the birdies at Augusta. The Wells Fargo, it's very important to avoid the bogeys. Byron Nelson, the one time it was played, birdies were very important. So things like that. The Memorial down here is very balanced. So when you see a 3.2 in the bogey avoidance, that's a pretty strong statistic considering, the highest I've seen right now is 3.5 from the Wells Fargo. Most of these run under under 3, even closer into the 2.7 to 2.5 range. Genesis is right at a 3. So bogey avoidance here at the Masters, very, very, very important. That's why I am more concerned with the bogey avoidance as opposed to the birdie gained this week at Augusta. And it's been pretty darn consistent. Actually, to be fair, both of these have been pretty darn consistent. This one has just been a bit more important. We'll move over to par 3s and 4s and 5s. There does not look to be a prominent par 3 length. It looks to be just strokes gained par 3. Although, if there was one, it would be the 225 plus. But I don't like saying that one hole has a lot of credence. There's one par 3 in this range, 2 in this range, and 1 in this range, at least on the scorecard. So if you wanted to put all of the par 3, or if you wanted to put all of your marbles into this bucket of the par 3, there's only one that measures there. I don't think that's sound to do, even though it's saying that it's the most important individual length. I think it's just strokes gained par 3. So we're going to be looking at just strokes gained par 3. Now, on the other hand, when you look at par 4s, the 4.76 is very, very high, but there is an extreme difference between the 450, 500 length and all of the other lengths. I mean, the 400 to 450 is, almost 3 times less important than the 450 to 500. So while all the par 4s do matter, this one is so heavily slanted in terms of importance. I'll bring up the comparison course again. Move over to par 4s. So like this number, let's see, at the Masters from 2012 forward was about 4.7. The Valero was very important, 4.2, 4.07. Like the Valspar, it's not as important. Players, 4.13 at the Arnold Palmer. The Honda gets to be very close to the Masters, but still not a 4.7. You got to come to Phoenix where the par 4s are as important. But you see these individual lengths, they don't really have the weight that the 450 to 500 does at the Masters. The 450 to 500 again was 3.7. I'm trying to find anything that's been above a 2. So there's Puerto Rico has a length that's at 2. And remember, we just saw that it was a 3.7 in that length at the Masters. There's nothing there. Nothing there. No 2s there. So you got a 2.4. Still nowhere close to. So again, all of this is just to hammer the point home. And I think this is one of the gleans of information I can give you all, is that this length of par 4 is going to be so astronomically important, or at least it has been in the past. So that's why I'm giving it a whole lot of credence. To be fair, last year the par 4 400 to 450 was fairly close to the 450 to 500, but it's really the only year that it was, at least in terms of the data that we're able to collect. So I am very confident we're going to hammer this length of par 4. And then finally, par 5. While you might also say that the par 5s 0 to 500 are just as important in relation to the par 5s as the 450 to 500 is to the par 4s, there are 0 holes that measure to this length at Augusta National on the scorecard. So that's when, you know, the par fives that do fall into this bucket are shortened when they move tees and flags and stuff. So indeed, the 4 par fives to fall in each of these 2 buckets. So 2 here, 2 here, and you can see these 2 numbers are nowhere close to the strokes gained par 5. So that's why I'm feeling that the strokes gained par 5, just in general, is going to be what we look at this week for the Masters, as opposed to a specific length. But again, I was showing you, the higher the number, the more indicative to long-term success, to high leaderboard success. I mean, the par 4s, 450 to 500, are a whole lot more important than just the par 5s alone. So that's why I'm going to be hammering this quite a bit. So the whole reason I brought that spreadsheet up is to explain why we're going to be looking at the stats that we are tonight. In the terms of driving distance, I didn't come away with the expectation that driving distance was important. So this is me discovering this with you all. This is one area that I actually didn't look at today. Let's look at driving distance. We'll say 12, just to round it up. Let's see if there's any course that plays to a 12 in terms of driving distance. The previous spreadsheet, this one here, is measuring all the way back to 2012, whereas this one is just 2017. So a full 12. Let's see, the Heritage, no. Valero, even though it's long, we talked all week last week that driving distance really didn't matter. There's only an 8 there. Valspar, Players, no. So Puerto Rico, a very long course. It's very important there to have distance. Arnold Palmer, a very long course. Very important to have distance there. Honda, not really. Genesis is important to have some distance. Phoenix, important to have some distance. The Farmers, another very long course. So distance is going to matter here a little bit. It's going to matter here here at Augusta National a little bit this week. How much? I'm leaning towards about 5% in a final mixed condition model. At least that's what I'm leaning to right now. So let's come back over to Fantasy National. We're going to start really dissecting all of this data that we just looked at. So let's move over to the birdies and bogeys. And now that we're here, let's look at bogeys avoided on difficult or in difficult rounds. So your top 10 bogey avoiders when it's difficult to par. Daniel Berger, Colin Morikawa, Justin Thomas, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Cantlay, Louis, Shane Lowry, Gary Woodland, Sung Jae, and Abraham Ancer. And we saw that the birdies were also pretty darn important, not as important as the bogeys, but still pretty darn important. So the players that are top 10 in both birdies gained and bogeys avoided when it is difficult to par, you've got Colin Morikawa, fourth in birdies, second in bogeys. You've got Shane Lowry, 9th and 7th. I'll give an honorable mention to John Rahm here. He's 7th in birdies, 11th in bogeys. Let's see. You've got Dustin Johnson, another honorable mention, I suppose. 12th in birdies, 4th in bogeys. So there's a look at the guys that are very good at both aspects, gaining birdies and avoiding bogeys when it's difficult. Something else I want to do is look at wind and birdies and bogeys, just players that, for whatever reason, do well in those regards in the wind. So again, top bogey avoiders in windy conditions. All of these being since the Masters last year. Sam Burns, Sung Jae, Xander, Brian Harman, Adam Scott, Shane Lowry, Russell Henley, Seamus Power, Louis, and Tyrrell Hatton. So a little bit of overlap here. Brian Harman, Shane Lowry. I can't remember if Louis was in there on the difficult or not. But there is only one player who is top 10 in both birdies gained and bogeys avoided in the wind, and that is Sam Burns. He is 6th in birdies gained, 1st in bogeys avoided in the wind. There is an honorable mention here. 11th in birdies, 6th in bogeys is Shane Lowry. So he was top 10, I believe, in both on difficult courses. He's now an honorable mention, but a really darn close to top 10 on both in the wind. And then lastly, let's look at this same data on long courses. So your top bogey avoiders since last year's Masters on long courses. It's Gary Woodland, Patrick Reed, Matt Fitzpatrick, Tom Hoge, Taylor Gooch, Rory, Christian Bezadenhout, Brian Harmon, Sung Jae, and Luke List. So you're starting to see quite a bit of overlap here. You've got Rory, it's popped a couple of times. Brian Harmon, I think, has been, I know he was on the windy. He might have been on the difficult as well. Sung Jae, Scheffler right here just outside the top 10. So the only player that is top 10 in both birdies and bogeys on long courses is Rory. He is 7th in birdies gained on long courses, 6th in bogeys avoided on long courses, and a honorable mention to Scotty Scheffler. He is 11th in both, so just missed out on the top 10 on both of those. So good stuff there to look at. I'm going to remove the long filter. I don't want to take off this custom date range filter since we're going to be looking at it so much. Let's see. Eagles, there's a couple of par 5s that yield Eagles at a decent enough rate. So I don't think Eagles gained is going to be something to look at this week. I still don't think it's birdies or better. It might be opportunities gained. But I think it's just going to be bogeys avoided mainly. Maybe birdies, maybe opportunities. So if you want to see opportunities gained, let's add opportunities gained on difficult rounds or in difficult rounds. So your top 10 opportunities gained players in rounds difficult to par. Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Rory, Hideki, Cameron Young, Dustin Johnson, John Rahm, Tom Hoge, Daniel Berger, and Taylor Gooch. First time we've mentioned Cameron Young tonight. There's DJ, who is 4th and 12th with bogeys and birdies on difficult. So now he's top 10 or top 5 in opportunities gained. Let's see. Colin Morikawa, 4th in birdies, 2nd in bogeys, 1st in opportunities when it's difficult. Let's see. Daniel Berger, 9th in opportunities, 1st in bogey avoidance. He is not getting his birdies though. So these guys that are giving themselves plenty of opportunities but not cashing them in, all it takes is a hot putting week, and then these numbers are going to start lining up. So I would say Daniel Berger is due to regress to the mean positively, meaning he should be cashing in some of these birdies because he's not a bad putter by any means. He's not the best. Now, bent is his least preferred surface, but he's coming off of Players where he gained 5.5 strokes on the greens. The Honda, he gained 2.5. He gained almost 3 at the Farmer, so he's not a bad putter. Now it can get real cold real quick, absolutely, but something is not lining up there in terms of opportunities and birdies. So I like what I'm seeing from Daniel Berger in an opportunities gained, not cashing them in. Something should change there. Kind of the same with Taylor Gooch. He is 10th in opportunities, only 22nd in birdies. Cameron Young is 5th in opportunities, 26th in birdies. Tom Hoge, 7th in opportunities, 72nd in birdies. So these guys that are giving themselves plenty of opportunities are just not cashing them in. I think the law of data says that they should regress to the mean eventually. Whether that is this week or not, I don't know. But when you combine something like this with the opportunities gained, the lack of birdies, and perhaps try to find guys that are good on bent, like Tom Hoagie, he has a lot of opportunities, not a lot of birdies, and bent is not it's his least preferred surface. That is not a player that would scream success right away. We can look at Cameron Young, 5th in opportunities, 26th in birdies, negative strokes gained on bent surfaces. Don't like that. We looked at Daniel Berger. Taylor Gooch. Is he somebody that, so Taylor Gooch does not mind bent. So that could be somebody to ponder throughout the week. Let's see, some of these other players that might be really far off. Corey Connors. Now, Corey Connors has never been a good putter anyway, so this kind of makes a little bit more sense. He's giving himself opportunities, just not cashing them in. His putter is known to be one of his weakest links in the game, or in his game. Conversely, on the other side, some of these guys that are gaining a bunch of birdies but not giving themselves a whole lot of opportunities. We're going to scroll down here. The first name that came to mind was Harris English. He's not in. He is withdrawn already. Somebody like Adam Scott, 17th in birdies, but he's only 60th in opportunities. So that means, or at least that tells me that something should regress to the mean either way. I would think it would be birdies more matching the opportunities gained. It seems like he's been making more than his fair share than what the opportunities say he should make. Somebody else would be Sergio. Since last year's Masters, 21st in birdies, 54th in opportunities. You have Louis, 15th in birdies, 44th in opportunities. So those are some guys to maybe take some pause, think about. If they're really cashing in a birdies at a big clip, but they're not generally giving themselves opportunities, something's going to have to change for that data to make a whole lot of sense. And again, all the numbers that I've been using, the birdies, the opportunities have been on difficult rounds to par. So good stuff there. Let's see. Do I want to add wind with opportunities? I don't think so. I think this will pretty well cover this tab here in Fantasy National with the birdies, bogeys, and perhaps opportunities. Let's move to the driving statistics, driving distance, greens, perhaps a little bit of good drives. Since I have the scoring relative to par difficult filter on, while I have it on, let's go ahead and look at scrambling since it's right here. So your top 10 scramblers when it is difficult, or when a round is difficult to par since last year's Masters. It's Justin Thomas, Charles Schwartzel, Christian Bezuidenhout, Patrick Cantlay, Patrick Reed, Brian Harmon, Sung Jae, Webb Simpson, Kevin Kisner, and Gary Woodland. Again, probably not a whole lot of surprise. Bezuidenhout, well known for his short game. Schwartzel, well known for his short game. Justin Thomas is great around the green. He's just not great when he's on the green. Reed, well known short game. Brian Harmon, Webb Simpson, Kisner, these guys that are short game type players. So there's a look at the scrambling game. Again, going to keep the scoring relative to par difficult filter on. Let's take a look at greens in regulation when it's difficult. So your top greens in regulation players when it's difficult: Corey Connors, Colin Morikawa, John Rahm, Daniel Berger, Hideki, Luke List, Shane Lowry, Paul Casey, Patrick Cantlay, and Abraham Answer. All right, so your premier ball strikers like you would expect, or premier iron players, approach players: Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, John Rahm, Berger, Hideki, Luke List, all these guys. Paul Casey, great with the irons, not great with the putter. Definitely wanted to take a look at greens when it's difficult. Let's take a look at greens in regulation when it's windy. And again, this is probably going to be similar to strokes gained approach, but not necessarily exact. So your top greens in regulation players when it's windy since last year's Masters. It's Colin Morikawa, Jon Rahm, Xander, Corey Connors, Webb Simpson, Paul Casey, Will Zalatoris, Louis, Sam Burns, and Sungjae. So I don't remember Xander being up there a lot tonight. This might be one of the first times we've talked about him. Colin Morikawa, again, premier iron player. You would expect his greens in regulation to be super high. Jon Rahm the same. Connors the same. So good stuff here. If we remove that filter and look at, we've done difficult. Don't really want to do long courses. So this is where I'm going to start bringing the data kind of back in. Start reining it in a little bit. Let's filter to the 2022 season. No other filters, no long, no windy or anything. Let's just take a look at our top greens and regulation gained players since the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season. Let's see how much this overlaps. So those players are Jon Rahm, Corey Connors, Luke List, Will Zalatoris, Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, Sepp Straka, Justin Thomas, Hideki, Sungjae, and Colin Morikawa. So Colin Morikawa all the way tied for 10th in greens and regulation gained with no filters since the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season. First time we've mentioned Sepp Straka at all tonight. So he's been hitting greens at a much higher clip than he was in the 2021 season. Something else that we want to look at, driving distance. We saw the driving distance mattered. Comparatively to other courses. It's a long course, it makes sense. So your top driving distance players in the field this week since the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season. Cameron Young, who shall not be named other than Mr. Kick Me in the Nuts. Cameron Champ, Luke List, Jon Rahm, Gary Woodland, Rory, Justin Thomas, Scotty Scheffler, and Hudson Swafford. So the guys you would expect. Hudson Swafford's a little interesting to see in the upper echelon of driving distance, especially ahead of guys like Dustin, Brooks, Bryson. But yeah, Hudson Swafford's there 10th in driving distance. But otherwise, a lot of these guys you would expect. Cameron Young hits it a mile off the tee. Champ, well known for hitting it a mile off the tee. List, Rahm, Woodland, very long. Rory. So definitely wanted to make sure we looked at that driving distance wise, greens since the start of the this PGA Tour season. So now let's look into par 3s and 4s and 5s and whatnot. And again, we saw in Microsoft Excel how I just think it's going to be par 3s. No specific length that's going to play the most important this week. It's just going to be strokes gained par 3. So your top strokes gained par 3 players since the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season. Taylor Gooch, Will Zalatoris, Mark Leishman, Tom Hoagie, Jason Kokrak, Russell Henley, Zach Johnson, Shane Lowry, Max Homa, Hideki, Paul Casey, and Daniel Berger, with those last 3 all tied for 10th. Good stuff. Not a lot of commentary I can add to there. Numbers are what they are. Let's see. I wonder how... I don't think I want to go too much into the data as far as par 3s and the win. Par 3s difficult. I think I just wanted to look at par 3s. I'm going to keep it the same going through the par 4s and the par 4s 450 to 500. So your top performers on par 4s, all par 4s, going back to the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season. You got Justin Thomas, Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Cameron Young, Louis, Cam Smith, Victor Hovland, Tom Hoagie, Daniel Berger, and Russell Henley. And there is quite a bit of overlap here between total strokes gained par 4 and performance on par 4s 450 to 500 yards. So guys in the top 10 both. Justin Thomas, first in overall par fours, fourth in the length of par fours, 450 to 500. You have John Rahm, second and fifth. Cameron Young, fourth and third. Louis, fifth and 10th. Victor Hovland, seventh overall par fours, leads the field this week in 450 to 500 par fours. Tom Hoge, 8th and 8th. I'll give a couple of honorable mentions here. You got Billy Horschel, 13th in overall par fours, second at the length of par fours. And then right under him, Luke List, 14th in overall par fours, 10th at the length of par fours. So a lot of weight going to be paid attention to here. I'm going to put quite a bit of weight here, to be honest with you. Yeah, so good stuff there. And then finally, at least in Fantasy National, we're going to look at par fives. Again, since the start of the 2022 PGA Tour season, your top strokes gained par five players. You've got Matt Fitzpatrick, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, Cam Smith, Terrell Hatton, Gary Woodland, Max Homa, Rory, and Tommy Fleetwood. All right. Remember, there are 2 par fives each in these buckets, but the length of the par five that was, at least by data-wise, the most important was the 0 to 500, and there are 0 par fives that measure to this length on the scorecard. So that's why I'm going to adjust this camera just a bit. That's why I'm not going to put a whole lot of weight into the length of the par fives, just strokes gained par five. So yeah, that is a look at what I've been looking at or in Fantasy National. Sorry, I'm a little OCD. I'm going to try to get this camera straightened up. I think that'll do it. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's a good look at the players and the stats that I have been keyed in on this week so far. Of course, I've got a whole day of research tomorrow and prep for the DFS Tactics for Wednesday, which again, just a reminder, 9 p.m. every Wednesday for every tournament, but especially this week, the Masters DFS Tactics show, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, here on YouTube and Twitch. But that's going to do it for the Fantasy National portion. Let's move over to Microsoft Excel and switch the view here for you. This is that same spreadsheet. Let's bring up the field here. Now that we know specifically what stats we want to look at. We looked at a couple of them last night, but let's really dive in here and get a feel for historically who has been good at those specific stats. So I'm going to first go by driving distance. So driving distance here at Augusta National, and be mindful, this is data going from 2021 to 2012 minus the Masters that Dustin Johnson won in the fall. It was too unique. I threw that tournament out essentially, but this is performance specifically only at Augusta National, so keep that in mind. But the top driving distance player at Augusta is Cameron Champ. No surprise, it is only one event. Dustin Johnson is second. You've got D-Sham up here, no surprise. Joaquin Niemann, surprisingly, at least surprisingly to me, very high up here on the driving distance. There's Tony Finau, John Rahm, Justin Thomas, Gary Woodland, who has not had a lot of success here, to be fair. He has missed half of his cuts at the Masters. Conversely, Adam Scott, at least since 2012, hasn't missed a cut up here in driving distance. Rory, 8 for 9 in making the cut. Tommy Fleetwood, 3 for 4. Louis, 8 for 9. So you can see just how the driving distance kind of, a decent little factor for guys who have at least performed well at Augusta. Maybe not necessarily won, Again, DJ's win is not included in this, but he's always long off the tee. Adam Scott, winner in 2013. Bubba, winner in 2012 and 2014. Let's see here. You have Patrick Reed is even positive in driving distance here at the Masters. Hideki last year positive. Tiger in 2019. And this isn't even prime Tiger. This is 2019 Tiger. Driving distance, clearly a factor. Jordan Spieth is one of the few that is under field average. And then Charles Schwartzel won in 2015. He was slightly under field average. So distance going to be a factor. Let's take a look at your top greens in regulation gained players. So we'll sort on greens in regulation. Largest to smallest. I think that's conveniently right there to the far left. So your top greens in regulation players. Again, Zalatoris and Morikawa each only one time. Very good, but one time. Morikawa, you would kind of expect that is his norm. Not to say that Will Zalatoris isn't a greens and regulation player. It's just one time he finished second. I don't expect him to finish second every single Masters. So of the guys that have played it quite a bit, Jordan Spieth, 7 for 7. Really, I would almost consider this first in greens and regulation just due to the amount of events or number of times he's played it. Justin Rose, 8 for 9, very high in greens. Justin Thomas, 5 for 5. Scotty Scheffler only once. Corey Connors, 2 for 3. John Rahm, 4 for 4. Adam Scott, 9 for 9. So you can see the level of importance that greens just plays here. Sergio, who hasn't really played this event all that well other than his win, even very high in terms of greens and regulation. You come down here to guys, let's see, Bezaden, who was only one time, Kokrak was only one time, Sungjae was only one time, he was very poor. But like Gary Woodland, he's missed half of his cuts here at Augusta. He's very poor at hitting greens and regulation here at Augusta. Tony Finau, he is 3 for 3 with an average finish of 8th, but he's not been hitting greens here. So it's either he's been doing a lot of work around the green and with the putter, which that is not Tony Finau's game, or it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. That's why I am not necessarily as high on Tony Finau this week as the numbers would say that he plays this course very well. I'm a little wary on this greens and regulation number for Tony. Mac Hughes struggles. Tyrrell Hatton is 3 for 4, but he doesn't gain a lot of greens and regulation. Kevin Na, 6 for 7, but doesn't gain a lot of greens and regulation. But you can see of the numbers. Oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that. Of the numbers of high missed cuts, there's a lot in the negative for greens and regulation. Whereas you have to come up here, you'll have a 1. Like Sergio's 5 for 9 in making the cut, so he's missed the cut 4 times. He's the kind of what I would say is the outlier up here in top performing greens and regulation. All of these guys generally have been playing it pretty darn well. So let's move into birdies and bogeys. I'll go ahead and go to Eagles in case you want to see it. But your top bogeys avoided players, bogeys. That one. All right. So it'll also give us a good look at birdies as well. So John Rahm's your top bogey avoider. But surprisingly, he is exactly field average at birdies gained. Whereas you look at somebody like Spieth, who is great at both birdies gained and bogeys avoided here at Augusta. He's played this event extremely well in years past. He won it in 2015, I think it was. Let's see, Tony Finau doing both well, so kind of making up for that greens and regulation number that's lacking. So he's either taking advantage of the par fives, which a little foreshadowing he is. Let's see, someone else here that's doing good at both. Xander, very good at both. Thomas Peters, he's only played it twice, but he's done well at both. Let's see, Rory, pretty good at both. Lee Westwood, pretty good at both. Colin Morikawa, a lot of birdies, not a lot of bogeys avoided. Same with Justin Rose. He's been gaining birdies quite a bit here at Augusta, but not as adept at avoiding the bogeys, if I could speak English. So good look there. Again, like I said, Jordan Spieth really high in both. DJ really high on both. Surprisingly, here's Justin Thomas. He has not missed a cut here, and this is why I think I'm leaning more bogeys than birdies. Justin Thomas is negative to the field, at least field average, in gaining birdies here at Augusta, but he's almost 3 strokes positive in bogey avoidance. So yeah, that's why I'm leaning more towards bogeys. Of course, if you're someone like Spieth, great at both, helps. Let's see, well, I keep scrolling over. I need to grab it all. Top strokes gained par 3 players. Let's see. Colin Morikawa just once. Champ just once. Zalatoris just once. There's Jordan Spieth again. DJ, Mark Leishman up here. He has not had the highest track record of success here. He is 5 for 7, averages a 31st. But you look at DJ, he's the same 5 for 7, but averages a 23rd. Pretty big difference when you start averaging those numbers out. Lee Westwood, 6 for 7, averaging a 21st. Not necessarily as good at the par 3s as Leishman and DJ, but don't overlook him. There's Tiger, 5 for 5 since 2012. Justin Thomas, 5 for 5. Rory. But you can see here where these numbers, they really die off in terms of importance very quickly. Leishman is 6th in strokes gained par 3, and it's just over 2. Whereas when we sort the par 4s and the par 4s 400 to 450, I'm pretty sure that 2.0 is not going to be reached for quite a while. So let's go ahead and sort by the par 4s. We'll take a look at the 450 to 500 while we're here. So the top strokes gained par 4 players historically here at Augusta since 2012. There's Spieth again, Justin Rose, Answer only once. There's John Rahm, Louis, Bobby Mack played the par 4 as well last year. There's Tiger, Adam Scott, Hideki, Tony Finau, Lee Westwood, Bryson. And I mentioned you'd have to come down. So 6th was the 2.0 for the par 3s. It's 20th here in the par 4s. Just again, exaggerating the fact that the strokes gained par 4 are so important. Now let's take a look at the 450 500s. Jordan Spieth again up at the top. Justin Rose, very good at both par 4s and the length of par 4s historically. Louis, 4.76, 4.75, and almost 4 at the length. Let's see. You've got Tiger and Scott good at both. Lee Westwood good at both. Stuart Sink, surprisingly good at both. But his struggles are over here. And then finally, strokes gained par 5. I alluded to it earlier. Tony Finau, probably one of the top in strokes gained par 5. In fact, I'll just sort it for you all. That is where he is making his hay around Augusta National. So the top strokes gained par 5 player, Victor, only played it twice, has done well here. Tony Finau, Scheffler, Kokrak, only once. So John Rahm, 3.73. There's the amateur, Stuart Hagestad in 2017, played very well, made the cut. Jordan Spieth again, Brooks, Xander, DJ, Rory, Webb Simpson, Brian Palmer. First time we've kind of been mentioning him tonight. So there is a look at the past performance of players specifically here at Augusta and the statistics that we really saw that will play most important this week. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the support. Jump in the comments. What stat do you think that I focused on that I shouldn't have? Is there a stat that you think I didn't touch at all that I should have? What do you want to see Wednesday night in the DFS Tactics? What are some of the narratives that you are thinking? If you give a like on the video tonight, leave a comment. I will, try to make a Tuesday show happen based on the comments. Whether it's a player breakdown, a course breakdown, digging more into this. If you want to have a special show like that, give a like on the video and then comment below what you want to see. So thanks again for tuning in. For all of the wagers that you have put in so far at the Masters, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making here at the Masters, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.